Florida State gets 2 commitments from the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Seminoles podcast. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get started with regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Noles have picked up not one, but 2 players from the transfer portal. We're going to talk about both of them in the order they committed. First one is LaVallee, and the second is Deamontae Diggs. So let's just jump into this right away. LaVallee has 3 years of eligibility. He's going to be a linebacker that probably is the traditional inside backer that you think of, 6'1", 225 pounds. He only played in 49 snaps this year, mostly a special teams player at Carolina. But here are some of the schools that recruited him out of high school. He's from the state of Georgia: Duke, Florida, Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech, Ole Miss, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, and Louisville are just a handful of his offers. He had a bunch. So this is a young man that Florida State's still getting in the developmental stage. And this is also something that I've talked about, and I'm sure many other people that cover Florida State as well. They need to bolster the depth at linebacker. I'm sure many of you think so too, based on the last few years in recruiting. This is one way you do it. You bring in a guy that has multiple years of eligibility. Now, the other young man we're going to talk about, Diggs, is a 1-year guy, and that's fine too, but you need roster and depth chart balance. LaVallee is going to be able to do that. I hope that he's able to play right away. But again, this is only going to be his second year coming up in 2025. So he might still be a little bit more of a special teams guy this next season. I don't know. He's got to earn that through spring practice, just like anybody else. A few of the other notes about him: 14 tackles this season. He blocked a kick, which is a good sign for his ability to be a special teams player. And he had a tackle for loss. And again, he's 6'1", 225 pounds. I think this is the kind of way that you should use the portal. Florida State probably didn't do that as much in the last couple of years. It was more 1- and 2-year guys, and it worked for the most part until we got to this past season. But they were familiar with him. He had other offers from major programs, and Florida State won the recruitment. If you take anything else away from this, with this young man, Florida State put in the time and made it work. And that's good, because you've got to earn some of these over the long haul. You had a relationship with him from high school. You need to win those battles when you get a second chance. The second guy to talk about is Diamonte Diggs. This is a totally different deal. He played at Coastal Carolina, same area, but 407 snaps this past season. And to be honest with you, a totally different deal, because he's a complete veteran. And I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen for those of you on YouTube. For those of you that are not, I will give off all the stats very happily, because this is a big pickup. He fits a need, not only as a player that could possibly start, but also one who might be able to play multiple roles for the Florida State Seminoles. So statistically, just going over some of the basic grades: defensive grade 63.9, 68.3 rush, tackling 62.5, 56.5 pass rush, and 58.7 in coverage. 6'5", 260. He'll be a 5th-year player next season, so you're getting a grad guy. And to be honest, it was interesting to me going through and looking at the games. Look towards the top of the screen on YouTube. Virginia game, he had one of his best games, so he stepped up against better competition. 72.6 defense, 77.1 rush defense, 77.9 in tackling. Those are good signs. You want guys to play up to the best competition. He also did pretty good in some of the other games that were key, like the Marshall team that they went against. That was one of the better teams in that league. Jacksonville State earlier in the year, very first game of the year, they were pretty good too. Had some of his better games there. I think this is a guy that will be able to play either weak side or strong side end, hand in the dirt, as a 3-down lineman. 260 and 6'5" is kind of the happy medium. Usually you want that guy to be the weak side defensive end with a hand in the dirt, but pass rushing situation, maybe he moves to the strong side. Either way, Florida State gets another guy. If you remember McCray, the guy they brought in earlier, that's a second guy. Plus you got Darrell Jackson. They got him to come back. He is no longer in the NFL draft. And they're also bringing in James Williams, who will probably, in my opinion, play a stand-up outside linebacker spot for the Noles, kind of a quasi-pass rusher. That's a great group to start off with. And we're only now at January 4th. FSU is ahead of the curve for where I thought they'd be. Honestly, I thought they would be probably closer to mid-February to get to this point. So pretty happy with what Florida State's been able to accomplish this far. And I'm guessing the NIL is working out pretty good too. As for what's next for Florida State, my guess is that the Noles are just going to keep grinding. Maybe another offensive lineman, maybe somebody else. They've had some other guys come on campus, got some other visits set up. When I get back to my apartment later today, I'm going to go through some of that. And then on Sunday, we're going to go over who's still left, who they've missed on, et cetera, kind of get an overview in Sunday's podcast. But for now, Florida State had a really good group, and you start to feel like this should end up being a top 10 portal class, if not top 5. That's something else I might as well touch on. Did anybody really expect that after this season? I know I didn't. I know they needed it, but did they really, really have the opportunity? Depended. 2 things happened. Number one, the staff changed, and it was massively better in terms of recruiting. Just having Junior over there at the receiver spot, Mr. Tim Harris Jr., he is a really good recruiter. That helped, and they got Deuce Robinson. So that's a huge factor. I know that Herb Hand is a pretty good recruiter for being around him at UCF, and I also know that some of the guys they brought in have a reputation based on, like, Pot Roast is supposed to be a really good recruiter. So that's nice. But they also had to still put in the effort for Florida State. And it's a program they weren't as familiar with. So everybody worked well together. I don't think that can be undersold. Florida State needs to continue on that path. But right now, this staff is doing really, really well. If you're a Florida State fan, there's reason for hope. And there's a reason to believe they're going to go to a bowl game next year, because especially the front seven has completely changed. They still need to add 1 or 2 more players, I think, to the front seven to solidify it as one of the better ones in the ACC. But again, we're only in early January, and Florida State is already at this point. That's a really good sign. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Seminoles podcast your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. You can find me on X at FBScout_Florida. That's FBScout_Florida. I will see everybody again on Sunday.